Thank you for listening to this Podcast One production, available on Apple Podcasts and Podcast One.
Hello and welcome. You're tuned into the best in paranormal talk radio. This is Beyond the Darkness. I'm your host, Dave Schrader. That guy, that's Tim Dennis. And today, we've got a special presentation for you. Earlier this week, I had a chance to sit down with the entire cast and crew from the TV show The Holzer Files, now airing on the Travel Channel every Thursday. Yeah, that's right, folks. It's not just a one-off special. Every Thursday for the next 9 weeks, there will be brand new episodes of The Holzer Files. And tonight, we're joined by the entire cast. Up first, we'll be joined by the daughter of the late, great paranormal investigator Hans Holzer. Alexandra Holzer will be with us. And then a little later on in the show, Cindy Kaza, the medium and psychic, and Shane Pittman, the tech from the show, will be a part of our program. We'll talk to them about what it's like to investigate these cases. And then we'll wrap up the program with Gabe Roth as we talk about researching the Holzer Files and discussing that. So sit back, relax, enjoy, and meet the cast of the Holzer Files. This is an exciting time, folks. I've had a great opportunity this last year to travel and see some amazing places and investigate some of the most famous hauntings. And it's finally here. We are just a few days away from the launch of the Holzer Files on the Travel Channel. It'll begin this Thursday, October 3rd. And I am a part of the program along with my fellow investigators, Cindy Kaza and Shane Pittman, researcher Gabe Roth, and our guest starting off this evening's program, Alexandra Holzer. Alexandra is a well-respected East Coast-based paranormal investigator. She's a sensitive, a journalist, and an author, and is inarguably living the life she was born to live. Alexandra's father was the late author, lyricist, lecturer, educator, spiritualist, and parapsychologist Professor Dr. Hans Holzer. And that is who the Holzer Files are all about. These cases, these amazing investigations into the unknown. And Alexandra was kind enough to reopen these files and allow the Travel Channel into their family and into these cases to look at them and give a fresh eye to a lot of the cases that existed. Welcome to the show, Alexandra Holzer. Alex, thanks so much for being here.
Thanks, Dave. Thanks for having me on.
You know, it's great to join you. You were one of our, favorite guests in the first year that I launched Darkness Radio. And you were kind enough in that year to also, we did a back-to-back episode. We spent an hour with you talking about your book, Growing Up Haunted, a ghostly memoir, and then spent an hour with your father talking about his book that had just been released as well. And had probably one of our all-time favorite back-to-back interviews to hear from two different generations and dealing with the supernatural and the paranormal. And now we get a chance to kind of, full circle this 12, 13 years later and get together and get to work together on this project. So first of all, speaking for the entire cast, just thank you so much for allowing the world to see the work that your father did and kind of reigniting this interest in Hans Holzer's research, because, I think a lot of the legendary investigators are falling by the wayside, and, the TV investigators have kind of become the nouveau riche, and a lot of the guys that these TV shows were built on, the case files, are forgotten. And it's so amazing that you and your family were willing to open up your hearts and the files again to let the world know about these cases. Was that a hard decision, or were you excited to get the chance to let your father's words and story be put out there again?
Yeah, I mean, it was definitely very surreal. It happened where there was an opportunity as the interest started changing. People were looking for found footage, so to speak, and it never really crossed our minds how that footage would ever be shared again. You know, we have the books. I've been out there for 10 years promoting him. And before he passed, which is actually 10 years this past April, you know, several years before he had passed, we had worked together. And so it's interesting because this is footage I haven't even seen. The family hasn't seen. The children haven't seen it. That's Grandpa Hans, like, in motion versus, you know, you see some interviews here and there, you know, on YouTube. But this is him back in the day before he had children and then when he started having us, you know. So it was a surreal moment, and it was very exciting because it was a way to share it on a platform that is dealing with modern-day investigators and so forth, and how we've kind of changed, like you said. So it was amazing.
For our listeners, it might have been living under a rock for the last 40, 50, 60 years and may not be familiar with your dad's work, although the guy wrote, 164 books?
Oh, it's 145.
Oh, 145. Sorry, I didn't mean to over-exaggerate it.
Now, listen, he wouldn't mind. Let me tell you. Be like, yes, please. I've wrote more than that. Why not? You know, he would love that. So it's all good.
Introduce us to Hans Holzer. And when did his interest in the Fortean and the paranormal really kind of kick in?
Well, you know, he was a young boy, and this is a little story that's gone around where his Uncle Henry saw potential in him because he would tell stories. And the first time that happened was when he was in kindergarten. The teacher had written a letter to his father, my grandpa Leo, and he said, "You have to have Hans to stop telling about fairies and ghosts, please. We kick him out of class." You know, so this is in Austria, clearly. So, but and it kind of spawned from there. And then he was a young teenager, and they had come over to Hoboken. So they left before the war. They ended up in Hoboken, New Jersey, and my grandfather had opened up a tailor shop and had him and his brother try to run it, and my grandmother was in the back. At that point, you know, women weren't allowed to work in the front. And he said, "This isn't for me. I need to write. I need to research. You know, there's more to life than this." And that really began it for him. And he became a skeptic journalist, writing for different papers and magazines. And it wasn't until Eileen Garrett in the late 1950s had met my father at a swanky Manhattan party, very elegant back then, and was fascinated by him and his stories and his interests. And she told him, "Hans, you need to put this in a book." And that birthed the book, The Ghost Hunter.
You said that he was a skeptic, but he definitely believed in the supernatural and the paranormal, but he just wasn't lured in by all the flim flam and flash and dazzle of the claims of the paranormal.
Well, you know, he was very much of a person to question everything, even back then when he was a young man. And a lot of his perceptions were based off of proof. And to understand at that point in his time that he would have to either prove or disprove that there was a happening. And at that place in time, he was in a different perspective. But as he got older, he changed that, and that's where he really got more involved with mediumship and combining the two for the Holzer method. So you have the science of it and the academic part with the other part of using a different form of a tool that parapsychologists don't believe in. So he really kind of just had a way about him where he had to question everything, and it ran parallel to the work in itself, and he became that investigator at that point.
You know, watching, and it is astounding, the footage that you and your family have, you know, seeing the original interviews, seeing the transmediumship sessions that he would do with Ethel Myers or Sybil Leek or one of the people that he was working with on these individual cases. He was meticulous in documenting the things that he found. He would take copious notes and do audio recordings and really. And even though he loved working with the transmediums, he still questioned what they were coming up with. And I thought that was great. He didn't just buy into it, although he, as he said on our interview multiple times, you need a good transmedium to do a good investigation. You can't just rely on tools. You need somebody that can help bridge those two worlds. He didn't buy into everything that they said. And it's, you know, as we've been reading through the files and hearing this, he would even question some of these aspects of what the mediums were picking up. He didn't discount them, but he questioned what really was meant by this. And I thought I thought he really walked that razor's edge eloquently, because he didn't he didn't throw the baby out with the bathwater. If it didn't fit the narrative, he didn't just dismiss it as garbage. He put it aside and said, this might be something we need to look at again later. And in many instances, he would be called back to some of these locations 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 times. Correct?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, oh, absolutely. I mean, the whole point was you couldn't just go to one environment and solve the mystery, so to speak. There were cases like that, absolutely. But the majority of them did require several visits and over a span of several months. You know, and with the psychics and the mediums, you know, if they came over, he tested them. And he always said, he went on record, that only 50% of them are really legitimate, because you've got a whole different ball of wax there, when, like what you were saying, that you really don't know. And so he really believed in a form of testing his mediums. They would come to him, they would flock, they would come over. He was very generous, made them, you know, coffee. It wasn't great coffee, but we will go there. Nonetheless, he was a good host. But the whole point was to get down to the nitty gritty and find out, even with his own mediums, whether or not he could feel that they were good enough to go on a case. And that's how he selected them for his cases.
Was there quite a few mediums that he worked with, or did he really just kind of, I know Ethel and Sybil are the two main mediums that seem to come up over and over throughout his transcripts and work. Would he sometimes have to employ local mediums at locations if Ethel or Sybil were not available?
Absolutely. He had actually put out the book, The Psychics Directory, 15 plus years ago. And he did that to purposely list all the people that he had tested and worked with. And that's not just locally, but from abroad. For instance, Philip Solomon, who's still in UK in Wolverhampton, worked with my father from overseas. And it just, he really, if it connected and it worked and it made sense, he would get people all the time. So it was never a problem for him if Ethel and or Sybil, if she was in the country at the time, were available. And, you know, Ethel's husband had joined in our apartment several times holding seances. And this was something I found out only a few years ago. And I said, wait a minute, her husband too? It's like, it really was just an oddball way of these connections. And that's how he worked.
Working with them, and you know, your father, what really kind of blew me away was how calm he remained in spite of how chilling some of the circumstances were. Was that his personal demeanor all the time? I mean, you'll see throughout the show, folks, as you're listening and reviewing some of the evidence that we looked at in headquarters. And you said some of this was the first time you got to see this footage since your father recorded it. You know, there were some chilling moments with these mediums, some creepy elements that took place, but your father always remained so stoic through all of that. What was his personality much like that at home?
It really was, you know, and listen, there was moments where he was funny, you know, he was a really serious man. But when he wanted to be funny and let down what little hair he had left, and that was another joke, and he was very good with me about it. But, you know, he found the humor in watching TV show at night, the British comedies, Benny Hill. That was his way to unwind, which at that time, growing up, I really didn't understand. He'd be hysterical laughing, you know, and then he'd have all these people over, and then it was very serious again. And we're talking witches and all sorts of personalities, actors and so forth. And the whole energy in the apartment, the vibe changed. So he really had many hats that he wore. And he kind of changed like a chameleon to the environment of what he was hosting or delving into. But overall, as a father and as a personality, he was very calm. He didn't like arguing. He was all about peace and veganism. He really was a very peaceful soul, very calm, didn't believe in fear. Nothing scared him, honestly, even the cockroaches in Manhattan growing up. He killed them with his hands at 3 a.m. I was like mortified. I said, I'm never touching you again. I mean, really? So he really was like that.
Dealing with the paranormal, disincarnate spirits, lost souls, some very angry, some very frightening in the way that they presented themselves. How do you think he was able to keep so calm in the face of that? I tried personally during the show to emulate parts of that, because it's very easy to allow your emotions and fear to take over. And when you're hearing or experiencing something, it made me respect your father so much more, being in these places, having experiences. And in some cases, you just like, man, that's enough. I need to get out of here. But your dad just dug his heels in and pushed harder to help the spirits out, which, a lot of people complain. TV shows and all these paranormal, they're never out there to help. They just want to find evidence. But your father would find the evidence and then do his very best to get those spirits to finally go to their great reward, whatever it was that they believed in.
Absolutely. Yeah, he really, actually, that fueled his fire. He was insulted. So if a spirit would talk back at him through his transmedium at that moment, and it became an argument, and you can see in the transcripts in the books that he really didn't allow that. Almost like, a difficult child taking a tone with you as the parent, I will not allow this. You will be respectful. And he took that same method and put it to the spirits. Yet again, he said fear is but nothing but a fleeting emotion. What are you afraid of? And so he really went in there like a superhero, if you will, to be competitive when needed to protect the medium, number one, and protect the people in the room and the environment, and also help now what might be an angry spirit or worse. And so he just wasn't having it. So he would take control of that environment at whatever cost.
And did a great job, again, watching him. And I've found it fascinating, too. When we meet in the headquarters with Gabe doing the research, digging in, and you giving us these amazing insights into the cases that your father would speak with you about and that you've done the research on as well. We get pieces of a puzzle that a lot of people want to put a definitive stamp on something and say, this is what it was, this is how it was handled, this is how it ended. Your father left these cases open-ended because what I found great was he didn't feel the need to say, case closed. There's nothing more to understand here. I've done my job. They're gone, blah, blah, blah. He always knew that there might be something. There might be another part of the story. And it's been great to read these files and case logs and see the interviews and listen to the tapes because he could suss out frauds so unbelievably well. And we've been following in those footsteps and seeing, even at the point he may not have been able to put his finger on what it was that was off, but he knew something was off. And he wouldn't give his stamp of approval as a haunted location, which many people, that's what they wanted from your father, right? These people wanted an attraction. They wanted the fame and fortune. And your dad wasn't just willing to give it out. These people had to earn it. He had to be proven that these places were truly paranormally active. And man, that's a lot of integrity.
Well, it is, and he knows it's his name on the line. When he was dealing with business, don't forget, this is a man that also was a creative. And so not only was he doing the casework, but he was writing screenplays. He was producing music. He was all over the place. And so he really had a very low tolerance level. And especially when dealing with mediumship, he just, he knew that his name would be attached to it, but he would always honor the potential questioning of a said case, of a said happening in a said location, because that was his job. It wasn't for him to judge, but when he got out in the field and he was in that environment and he saw what was going on, it took him a while to process the information as it should, because, again, you don't want to jump on anything. You have your gut and your intuition kicks in. It tells you, okay, something's off here. But you go back home, you go through all the information, the data and so forth, and you start to piece it together. And he was irate. And things like that happen because they're attaching his name to them for validity, because he's already established. And so even back then, these things would happen at times. And so he really just put up with nothing. No BS with him.
When he had a case that he knew was paranormal, but the story wasn't adding up, did it gnaw him apart trying to figure out what that enigma was?
It did. It really did. And many a times it would bother him because he felt that there was more to it. And sometimes the homeowners wouldn't contact him. There would be no more communication. He's reached out to check in and so forth, and no correspondence. And this is pre-internet, mind you. So, he had a Rolodex. He lived his life in his Rolodex. And that's how we communicated at that point, and he was frustrated because for him, he always wanted to move the spirit in question and or plural to where they need to be because they're no longer of their physical world, which is the world that you and I are currently in. And so you shouldn't really be here unless you're free to come and go. And so he was always troubled by those cases. Absolutely.
We're both under kind of a gag order of what we can and can't say, but there were some of these cases, and I'm just going to throw out the title of it, the Ocean-Born Mary case, which is a really, to be honest with you, before this, I was unfamiliar with that tale. And then kind of immersing myself into your father's research and work on it and looking at this, I was so excited to dig deeper into this case and find things. Your father was so adept at finding information. And this was, like I said, 30, 40, 50, 60 years ago. He didn't have the Google. He didn't have things and search engines that could do all this work for him. He was out there in the field interviewing people, going to historical societies, talking to people to get the background so he could get a better understanding. And in the Ocean-Born Mary case, that thing was like a Rubik's Cube, the way it was constantly twisting and changing as we're investigating the story, thinking we're onto one thing and something else opens up. And it was like your father was ahead of us the whole time, knowing, and almost kind of from beyond pointing us into the right directions to get the actual answers that were not available to him back then. And it's astounding what opens up when you're able to look at this. And to me, that was great because I loved reading what he had to say about these different stories. And when he would point things out of, when he would have contention about this, what was upsetting him about the story, what he didn't understand or why he was having a hard time grappling with what was being shared. He would go in and he knew somebody was telling him a lie, but he was finding activity, but it wasn't matching up with the story or the histories that were there. And it was like watching a master detective, like a Sherlock Holmes, as he's trying to piece together this entire plot line of a story and kind of reaching through space time to continue that work, because it was like he left us the clues and the breadcrumbs to follow now, so that knowing that in the future, this might be more available. We might be able to go down these tracks. He was giving us the avenues to look into.
Well, he got all that through his mouth. Let me tell you, he had a mouth, and he was not afraid or shied away from picking up that phone or showing up at a mayor's office and saying, I need information and I need it now. This is how he spoke. So as we said, no internet, this is going back 60 plus years. He didn't care. He needed to get what he needed to get, and he found his resources. And that's how he operated. And, going through those motions of the layered work, I have to tell you, this just happened to me, which is correlating to you bringing this up with not saying much. But I had done a live stream, a radio show for our former colleague, Mike Rexler. I hope I'm saying that right. Probably not. But, loves you, and so I had done this, and their co-host happened to be a medium unbeknownst to me, because I don't assume, listen, we all have the ability. But she had said something in the first few minutes of that show where she said, and she can't possibly know anything. She really can't. I've never met the woman before, and this sounds like my father. I've never met her before, but this is what she said, and I'm telling you, she knows something. It was really parallel to that. And she said that one of the cases that will be seen on the show, as we're talking about, that you guys, when you were there, and the information that we all found and stumbled upon is amazing, and that you guys were on the right track. And that has to come through from spirit, whether it's my father or somebody else that connected to my father. And I just was floored because I knew exactly what it was. I didn't say anything. And then now you're saying what you're saying. And I just want to validate to you, you guys did a great job, because something was going on. And I think that's a great validation. And from the Holzer family, thank you for that.
Well, like I said, it was our pleasure to go in and try to and again, we're working in the same vein as your father, following that lead, not closing the files, but adding to them, knowing that, maybe 40 years from now, 50 years from now, somebody will reopen this and take a different look at what's going on in this case and maybe have a whole new version of reality at that point. So it's hard because like I said, you want to close things. You want to feel like you've put the final stamp on it. But your father was smart enough to know, and you've said it during our headquarters scenes. My father said, cases are never fully closed. There's always something left to find. And man, you were right. He was right. That's been an astounding part of this to me, and something that has reawakened a passion for me in the field of paranormal investigating. We have to take a quick break. When we come back, we'll continue our discussion with Alexandra. Some of the cases that her father was really astounded by, and how it led Alexandra to follow in his footsteps now all these years later as an investigator and a sensitive to go out there and continue the legacy of the Holzer Files. But I'm curious, there are so many case files. I mean, like you said, your dad wrote over 140 books on the different aspects of the paranormal and ghosts and witches and UFOs and things of that like. What were some of the cases that he just was most fascinated by?
Well, of course, there's the Whaley House. And that really was very special to him. It really meant something to him because he kind of was surprised at the feedback after the notoriety that came with it. He really had no intention on going there and saying, hey, I'm going to get you in Time Magazine and whatnot, and have, Regis doesn't come. That really wasn't the intention. And that's not how those two even got together to go out there, mind you. He really was pleased at cases like that, and such as Jamal Mansion, where he was able to put them on the map for credibility, that they weren't some scary haunted house and or mansion turned museums where people would just kind of scoff at it. It was again, it goes back to integrity, old school, being old fashioned, respect. And those main two he just was floored by it because it made press, And the thing with Amityville, he shied away from because it had a lot of negative connotations to it. And his work in that really kind of took a turn, and people took from it what they would, over the years. And he kind of stayed away from that part of it. But cases like the ones I've mentioned are just, and then the private ones that didn't make it into the books that are still written in letters that he couldn't, publicize or write about for whatever reason. There's letters of people reaching out to him and the yearning to help because he understood. He understood. He didn't judge. He said, there's something going on that's bigger than us. That's part of life. We're here and we're not, but we are, and other things in between. So, Now,
Amityville, I mean, obviously, a lot of people are familiar with this story, and it's one of the most controversial hauntings out there. Your father did look into it and, was able to find, and I've found it fascinating too. Everybody says, oh yeah, it's nonsense about the Indian burial grounds, but this wasn't something that your dad just created. These were from interviews from people from the historical societies that were going back through the pages of history, going back through all of what was said in that area and really kind of defining it. Was cases like that, were cases like that very stressful for him that, here, even when he's showing the truth and he can show the provenance of where he's getting this information, people were just so dismissive of some of this work?
Mm-hmm. Oh, absolutely. There's always that. He was, an unorthodox kind of rogue investigator, which I kind of feel that I've gone that path. It's almost like you kind of, you fit in, you don't fit in, and people are going to scoff at you or they're not going to scoff at you no matter what you present to the table as fact. He really just, the whole thing with Amityville, I mean, when I was old enough to even understand that because that happened. I was only a few years old, when that came about. And so his intentions, he was also a history buff. Every book in the house wasn't just ghosts and witches and UFOs and the occult and whatnot. He had sex books, let me tell you. I don't even want to go there. But he also had, library filled with history, our history, and he was always fascinated with locations in other parts of the country and the world. He was proficient in Japanese. The man, there's no stopping him. And he was always in the quest for the truth, or what was the truth, or what we thought was the truth. And, shine a light to what are the possibilities and theories of what we thought was, it really isn't. And what does that mean? So, this whole thing with Amityville, he really dug up through the history, as you know. That's how we really should be doing it. And thanks to the Holzer Files, that's how it's being done. Is you go through the history, you get information, you interview people, you try to get as much as you can before you go into that actual investigation, because then things change again. And then you're dealing with the mind's perception and so forth. So he really did look for the history.
And, with that said, what I was excited, when I first heard, we're going to examine the Whaley House, in all honesty, I thought, okay, I understand why this is, your father put the Whaley House on the map, essentially, really kind of took it to that next echelon of being recognized as the most haunted house in America. And I thought, boy, it's been covered by so many TV shows. So many things have taken place there. What in God's green earth could there be left to uncover? And I got to tell you, Alex, if you weren't proud of your father before, you should be after this. People, when they heard Hans Holzer's name, opened up like a flower to us. They would expose things to us and share things with us that they had never shared before. We were given access to some documents that had never been shared in the past. They gave us amazing insight into the Whaley House and its history and stories, and really uncovered a whole new aspect of the story, because the key element, your father, being involved in the show and being a part of it, that's what opened up these doors. And we had a chance to investigate some locations that have been highly sought after for 40, 50, 60 years. Every TV show has tried to get in there, and nobody's had an interest in allowing anybody in. And the minute our production team called and said, listen, Hans Holzer was there, we're working with his daughter and re-examining these cases, they said, when do you want to come? And they allowed us some unfettered access to locations and amazing stories that have continued over these 40, 50, 60 years. And it felt so unbelievable knowing that we're walking in your father's footsteps and in the footsteps of Ethel Myers and Sybil Leek. And we're in these same places standing, like you and I recently got a chance to visit the Whaley House together. And you got to stand in that spot where your father and Ethel did their transmedium session, and along with Regis Philbin, who was covering it right. And you got to stand there, and it's hard not to. And I'm not saying that I was picking up the ghost of your father, but it's hard not to kind of feel like there's that presence, because this is his case, his work, and you've. It's palpable almost. You can feel the nudging to get those answers.
Feeling something. I felt you were being very kind to take some photos, which I'll share when we have that episode, because it's really just, and I appreciate you doing that, because I don't think like that. I'm not going to take a selfie of myself saying, hey, Dad was here behind me. Whoa, cool. To me, it's like, that's just so disrespectful, and I know he wouldn't want me to do it that way. So, and I appreciate that. It really was, it just was seeped in so many layers. I don't even know where to start. But, yeah, it was amazing.
And the cases that he would examine, I mean, he had so many people reaching out from him. We're seeing boxes upon boxes, as you mentioned, of letters of, Dr. Holzer, please come investigate. He couldn't get to all of the places, but he damn near tried. I mean, he went all over the world to examine some of these cases and try to get to the bottom of these stories. And were there specific things that your father looked for, triggers that made him more fascinated by investigating a story over others?
Yeah, he definitely, it's like he had a radar. So he got some letters in, and some of them spoke to him in a certain fashion that seemed very shallow, not very descriptive in detail. He would put them to the side. He would never throw anything out. He would just put it to the side. And the other letters that came in that were steeped with details that had earnest voice to it, that really needed the help or had curiosity as to what was going on, those were the ones that he'd put to the other side that he would get to. And, you know, he didn't know at the time, and he didn't develop that till later on in life, was he was so intuitive. He was so intuitive, but he didn't allow himself to wear that hat because he had a role, and he played that role, and he believed in that role. And then things shifted later on in life where he kind of went towards the way of the medium. And so, again, like we all go through in our life path, we change. You know, you can't stay the same, and that's not the point of the life lesson. But he really just, you know, that was those moments, you know. And so, yeah, he really got a sense of it. He just didn't know it.
Let me ask you this, because I know this will be a point that a lot of people that followed your father's work will find maybe unsettling, is that we do employ technology where he was not a fan of technology and things, but he used an audio recorder, of course, tape recorder, video cameras, and still photography. He believed in the basics of this. We're going in with different technology. And, I've said to some of the naysayers, Hans Holzer didn't believe in the technology because there was no technology developed to try to do this, to try to communicate with the other side. This, I think, is the natural evolution of the investigative tact that we're taking. And, you know, where do you think your father would land on that now with the marriage of mediumship, technology, and research?
Well, knowing Father, he would probably be like, what is this stuff? Listen, I tried one time. I went over to the apartment and I had a digital recorder. God forbid. I said, Daddy, look at this. It records everything. He goes, what's this? Is a pen? What is it? What does it do? And I said, oh my God, forget it. Listen, he had a computer. It was collecting dust. We tried to bring him in to the new world, so to speak. But he really was very old school. I think now, if he was around and all this was happening, he was able to use the technology. He would pick apart what he thought was credible by using it himself and then saying, this is good, this is not good. And that's how he would do it. So he wouldn't poo-poo everything that's out today versus his time. He would just simply want to know what each thing does, what the purpose is, what are the results, and go from there.
Well, and you told kind of a funny story when we were out at Whaley, and you're like, you know, my father was not keen with this technology, but he's made his presence known to you through spirit boxes and technology, hasn't he?
Right. And this is, and it's mind-boggling because this is what I've grown up learning from him. This is how I'm focusing my mind to be, but yet I have a more sensitive side to myself, so I'm like one of his people that he's worked with in mediumship. I'm like, but I'm not, but I am. And then this spirit box session happens where a group in Florida had reached out to me. I had a friend of mine who was out there, and she said, listen, do you want to get in on this? This was 6 weeks after he had passed. So I'm, as we know, right, when we lose our parents, we're still in a fog. We're processing in our own way. And, you know, I said, yeah, fine, I'll do it. There was no intention to contact my father. There was nothing. It was just sensitive of a moment. So we all did it. I did it via phone. I said, oh, God, now I sound like my father. Over the phone, really? Okay, fine. So I do it because if I do it, I say I'm going to do it. He came through the spirit box, and the Florida team sitting there, and they're saying, did you hear that? And so I said, can you please say it louder? So they're encouraging me to speak up because I don't know what to do. And I said, Daddy, is that you? Because they think they heard my father. I said, Hans Holzer's here. It was in a female voice, very stern, and in an accent. And I said, oh, God, what do I do with this? This doesn't make sense. And so he used that device to communicate after he had passed, to come through as if he knew that his daughter was going to do this moment. And it came through, and I started crying because I knew. And there's so many people out there that you have as your followers and the listeners and in life that understand what we're talking about is you have a feeling that you can't prove or disprove, but it's happening. And that's what happened to me. And I said, Daddy, I love you, because I couldn't say that to him before he died. So he came through, and the next voice that came through was a male voice and said, I love you, Alex. I was done. You know what I mean? I was done. I said, things have changed.
That's beautiful. And right, here he is, no, you need a good trance medium. But now here he is. He's using the 21st century version of a trance medium coming through the spirit box, and reluctantly so, but he knew that you could hear him, and he knew that would be the way to reach you.
Yep. And he did. And I changed from that day on. I wrote more. I asked more questions. I was more diligent in my day-to-day. And now where we are today, when I communicate with him, it's like sometimes I think, is that you? Because we all go through that, especially when we lose a parent, or a loved one, is this really happening? And it is. It is. That's how we talk with them at whatever point, through dreams, through moments, through these connections. That's their way to get through with the energy that they have to create to come to us, because they're on different planes. So, and I have to realize that, oh my God, he's not of the physical world anymore. I still have his ashes. I'm still holding on to his ashes. So I have issues, man. I don't know. But you're right. It's he didn't care at that point. I think once you cross over and you see from the other point of view, that perspective like he had in life, it changes. Listen, this is the way I can talk to you. It's not about belief. It's about it's happening. It's real. I'm coming through. And then you're going to have to make that connection. And that's mediumship.
Do you think he would be proud to know that you're following in his footsteps and continuing to investigate supernatural claims?
Absolutely. Well, we talked about this in life, and he wanted me to carry on the name. And one of the things he had said, I had asked him when I was much younger, I said, did you regret having no boys? Because, they carry on that last name. And he had 2 girls. And he said, absolutely not, Alex. I love my beautiful daughters. And you publish under Holzer. Case closed. I said, I guess in that case it's closed. You know what I mean? So I knew then he was proud and that he understood what I was trying to do for him, and that he always said, you're such a great writer. You're such a great intuitive. You have the abilities. You have to believe in yourself. But, growing up as a kid into young adulthood, you go about your own path. You go to college. You do whatever. And I went to art school. So I went away from him. I didn't want to hear any of it, and then coming back to it, when I lost my late aunt, which was my mother's sister, who was very close to my father, and my grandmother, her mother, who married the Count of Russia. Everybody was like, divorced, doesn't matter. Everybody still came together at the house, his house. It was very bizarre. And he always encouraged me to believe. Just believe in yourself. And so, yeah, he this is what he wanted. He wanted, but I think in the vein of getting the work back out there, it's important for people to see, because there's so much history. And what are we taught in school? Our history. And that's really what he was about, was to educate and for people to take from that and move on in their lives and do good and be good people and understand that there are things that we can't always explain, but we understand that are happening. Can't disprove that it's not real. And what's not real, well, we should know what's not real. So, yeah, he's definitely guided us and has come back to keep pushing me with books coming off my bookcase. It's great. It's lovely. The most impromptu moments, the book goes off the bookcase, and I'm like, what am I going to tell? We keep it quiet because, again, you have to assume it, you have to prove it. But for me, I was there. It happened. I didn't ask for it. I wasn't looking for it, but it happened. And it was him because it was his book.
Do you, and with that in mind, I mean, he's giving you these kind of messages in your mind. This is the connection that continues between the two of you. I'm curious, with connections extending past that, do you believe that there are places seeking still the Holzer's nod of approval as being haunted? Do you see people trying to hoodwink you as well?
Yeah, I don't know. It's a tough one. I think that, listen, I've had over the years, and this is even when he was alive, and I went and I joined Facebook after MySpace kind of dwindled down, and I've had people write to me, but it kind of, after he passed, it really started to amp up, and even to this day, I've had some emails and letters and people writing in before even the show announcements and all that. Mediums and all sorts of people that say they're connected to my father. And, I don't scoff it, and like Father before me, I don't want to judge it. I'm very polite about it, and I'll even take a phone call and I'll see this through. But at some point, when they become nutty, they become nutty. And so it's at that point. So there are some mediums that are still around that have worked with my father, one of which is Mercer Anderson. And she and I are always in contact. We work together, but she's seasoned. She's been around a while, and she works with my father directly. And she'll give me messages. And so I only take the ones that I feel are noted, including the one from the show I just told you about, where this co-host said something to the fact of what you guys were doing was right on par, which is a case that's going to be shown in the Holzer Files. So I sat there and said, I've never met her either, but I've known Marissa since I was a kid in my home working with Daddy. And then here comes this beautiful soul, Vanessa, from this other show, knowing information as well. And this is where I take it from, and I say these people aren't out to hurt or to create something negative. They really are having the gift of sight, and God bless them, because it's wonderful. And I take it, and then I put it to the side.
Was your father ever followed dealing with an attachment himself? I mean, having cast all these spirits and trying to help them, leave this plane and go where they belong, did he ever have hangers on?
He had those attachments for sure, because our apartment, which was on the Upper West Side of Manhattan, lovely. My father actually lived a few blocks in there before he met my mother. Cute little story. And then we ended up living there, a few blocks from where he started out. So he would leave and come home and leave and come home. And sometimes when he would leave, where he'd have to take flights out to LA or Canada or Europe, what have you, he'd come back with a suitcase. I knew he went far. I really didn't take much mind to it. I just knew Daddy was gone, and I was sad. But he'd come home some nights, and things would shift. The energy would shift at the apartment. I thought I was crazy. And my sister, who was 8 years ahead of me, would lock herself in her room and be on her phone with God knows doing what. And I'd be in my room like, what do I do? So I would draw art, I'd read books, very exciting. And things would shift in that room. So one night he'd come home from doing his work, and then my room's energy changed. And I even knew at that young age that something changed. It shifted. And so that my whole night trying to sleep to get up for school in the morning was ruined, because there'd be things sitting on my bed, or in broad daylight I'd see flashes. And I even saw Ethel. And this is, I haven't told anybody, and I saved this one for you.
Thank you.
And I've been holding on to it. Yeah. Thanks so much. It's like having, Reese's Pieces and M&M's. It's so exciting. But let me tell you, it was Halloween. I can't help it. We bought candy. But I was probably 12. I'm in the living room. I would watch TV in there. I came home from school. I made my lunch. I sat down. I didn't want to do homework, so of course I post on that. And at the corner of my eye, it's about after 4 o'clock, I see what looks like Ethel moving and then dissipating. And this would happen off and on in front of his office. So at the beginning of the apartment, rather, you'd open the front door. You see there's a small little pantry entryway. Like what we saw in the Whaley house, the flooring is black and white tile. So that's why I just made a remark to you. It reminds me of a Manhattan apartment. That flooring, and then to your right is your kitchen galley, and right to your first right is my father's office lair. And she would pass by there off and on, and it didn't take me until probably I'm like, but who is this? And it's like, so the contact and the communications, he would always have, whether he came home from a case or worked with people that passed away, they come back. And they come to the apartment. But yeah, there was things that happened that were not normal, and then it would dissipate. You know what I mean? So it would just it would stop.
Well,
I'd go about my routine.
We've got an exciting new venture, and bringing your dad and his work to the 21st century, bringing it to a whole new experience base of people that love the supernatural. And I know that they are going to absolutely love what you brought forward. So again, Alex, thank you so much for sharing your father's files with us and allowing us to reinvestigate these cases.
Well, thank you for doing all of it, and for me to be a part of it. Obviously, it's a great thing, and it's a family affair. So thank you so much, Dave.
Well, I hope you enjoyed our first segment. Alexandra Holzer, always fascinating to visit with. And again, she was with us in, I think, our first or second season of Beyond the Darkness Radio. And she had introduced us to her father, Hans. We did a back-to-back episode and did a full episode with Hans Holzer. That was his last known recorded radio interview. And we were lucky enough to be that show to have it. So it was a pleasure to have that opportunity, and then again to do this interview with Alexandra talking about the new show. All right. Now I'd like to introduce you to fellow castmates Shane Pittman and Cindy Kaza, a very integral part of the Holzer Files. Now joining me on the line, the team I got to work with and had such a great time with this last season, investigating these case files, looking into them. We've got Cindy Kaza. She is a psychic medium, and she had her first memorable encounter with a spirit when she was just 10 years old. She dismissed this chilling experience as just a dream until her early 20s, when she realized she was continually having physically spiritual experiences. And since that awakening, Cindy has been searching for the truth about her gifts and testing the limits of her multifaceted abilities, including automatic writing, in which she allows the dead to communicate directly through her via free-form writing. Shane Pittman is also with us tonight. He is an equipment technician who has had profound unexplained paranormal experiences since childhood, and Shane became determined to learn as much as he could by researching every possible technological method in the hopes of finding the truth about his otherworldly encounters. Guys, thank you so much for staying up late and coming on the show with me this evening.
No problem.
Thank you for having us.
You know, it's interesting that Travel Channel sought us out, brought us together to investigate these cases. And I really enjoyed the fact that we were able to gel so quickly as a team, bringing totally different kind of components to the investigation. But I want to know, Cindy, I mean, Hans Holzer, when they reached out to you and said, we're going to give you an opportunity to re-examine these cases. You're going to be following in the footsteps of Hans Holzer, Ethel Meyer, Sybil Leek, and the fantastic teams that he would work with. How did that hit you?
I was really excited about it, especially because, you know, Hans Holzer really believed in mediums, and not all paranormal investigators use mediums, right? So I thought it was so cool for me to be able to go into something, and I didn't have the information prior to where we were going or the cases, but to go in and know that my evidence, you know, all these years later could and should align with a medium that got the, you know, the evidence 50 years prior. So for me, it was really, really exciting.
And Shane, you and I, we've talked about this, but, you know, and I mentioned it with Alexandra. Here's a guy, Hans Holzer, who was very much into documenting every aspect of the paranormal phenomena, but was very basic. He recorded his live sessions with the mediums that he worked with. He did photographs and videotape, of course, or film of these encounters. But he was not big into the technology. As a matter of fact, he was very much against it for a long time. Did that concern you in taking on a role in a show like this, knowing that the man that we're you know, kind of walking in the shadow of was polar opposite of what we were going to be bringing to this program?
Yeah, it was very concerning because, you know, he developed, you know, what they call now the Holzer method, which was taking the medium and into a location, and he was very bare bones about it. But he was also an investigator that was seeking the truth. And so that was comforting to me, because with the latest technology that we have out there today, it really pushes us toward the truth. So I really think that he would be pleased in what we're doing now, especially with the technological advances that we have today. I think he'd really be pleased with it. So that was comforting. But yeah, it was concerning in the beginning. But I think that we're on the right path, and it's just very exciting and humbling to be a part of it.
When they reached out to me and they said, you know, we've got this program that's, you know, going to be picked up by the Travel Channel. We're looking to put together the right team. We know, Dave, that you were one of the last people to interview Hans Holzer. You're friends with Alexandra Holzer. Would you consider doing this? I had a lot of trepidation about being part of an investigative series. I did Paranormal Challenge, where I got to be a judge and watch people investigate. I've been a background player on TV shows like Paranormal State and Ghost Adventures, but I had really no interest in being a full-time investigator. Hans Holzer's name is truthfully what drew me into this project, and being able to look at these case files, knowing that we had original video, audio, photographs, everything from this guy to go into. And I reached out to Alex and said, I'm really interested in doing this, but I want to make sure we're doing right by your father. And, as we discussed last hour, he didn't use the technology because at that time there was no technology that was really kind of keyed towards paranormal investigating. So he was not keen on a lot of it. Now that we've got so many technological advancements by these different people coming forward and creating things to test the methodologies and the theories behind paranormal experiences, Alexandra said, I feel like this would be the next step for him. He would be very picky, as she said last hour. He'd be very picky about what equipment. He'd want to understand how it worked and why it's doing what it's doing. But this is the next step. And Cindy, I don't know. Going into investigations like this, you're always, you've always been the tool to make this kind of communication. Is it kind of exciting to be able to kind of have that conduit and also see the technology backing up the experiences that you're witnessing?
Oh, absolutely. It's so awesome because when I'm picking up on something and I know what I'm feeling and sensing and getting information, and then the technology picks up something at the same time, it's just validation. So I was so excited that I was allowed to be a part of the actual investigation and also do the walkthrough, right? Because I think people get to see like, oh, I'm picking this up, and then the equipment's going crazy at the same time. I think it's really, really awesome to be able to utilize both things at the same time, for sure.
I was blown away. Getting a chance. I've been friends with Chip Coffey and many different mediums in the field, Chris Fleming and then Michael and Marty Perry and everybody through the field. And I have an affinity for them, love working with them. But I'm always cautious in working in a paranormal investigation because it's so hard to corroborate what they're telling you. Because in most times, it's like, oh, we're all gathered together at the Stanley Hotel or Eastern State Penitentiary or Mansfield Reformatory. They know what's there. They know what's going on. So the skeptic in me is always alive in those situations and questioning, how much did they know? And when we went to do the show and I saw how deep they were keeping you in the dark, and I knew there were points of frustration because of it as well, because it's, we're going in on a lot of the stuff blind in some cases, not knowing what you're picking up on. And I was fascinated to be there, and Shane and I would talk about this off air. We'd listen to what you have to say, and we had the basic outline of this story from the files that Hans Holzer had that you got no chance to examine. Of course, we have to keep you in the dark, as Hans Holzer did with the mediums that he worked with, so that you're getting pure information that's untainted by history or the stories of these locations. And watching you work was really fascinating to me, because there would be parts that you would crack into and I could see the frustration. You were looking for some kind of corroboration from Shane and I. We had no clue what you were connecting with. And then we would sit down and we're like, God, what does this piece of the puzzle mean? This is nothing we've seen in the notes, which was hopeful, because it was like, great, she's tapping into a new part of the story, or she's finding something that even Shane and I had no clue about. And then we would start talking to experiencers and historians and family members and people in the know. And all of a sudden it was just crazy how these stories would open up and it would connect to the things that you were picking up on. And the people would be blown away. I'd be talking, somebody'd say, oh, well, my great uncle was here and he tripped down the stairs and bumped his head and did this. And all of a sudden I'm flashing back to the moment you're like, some man fell down these stairs and bumped his head. And this person's like, there's no way. I've never told anybody that happened. And that was really compelling to me to watch these moments when I couldn't figure out where these puzzle pieces were going, but you were like miles ahead of us in the storyline just from the psychic content. Is that exciting and frustrating at the same time to know that you're picking up on things, but having no clue how they're going to connect to this story?
Well, definitely. I mean, because when I work, I just have to trust and surrender. I believe in the spirit world, and they're there to help, and they know what we're up to. But then sometimes you go to a location, right, and there's so many spirits there, and when you're making a show, it's really, there's a lot of pressure, because when I'm not getting validation, I'm like, gosh, I hope I'm on point with the investigation we're on, because I don't know, it could have been somebody that died 50 years prior related to an entirely different family, right? And I just have to keep going with what I'm getting. So it's frustrating, but it's also exciting. And then, what really helped me throughout the show was just to learn to trust, because, at the end when we were doing the reveal, I was like, wow, I was on point with that. And it was part of the story. It just was something that we didn't have prior knowledge of, or that, you guys didn't. Right. So,
right.
It's all kind of like, you just have to, as a medium, surrender to what the experience, and trust that the spirit world has your back, and just go for it.
It was interesting because they would, for the kind of backside insiders information on this, folks, we would do things like we would do these baseline investigations. I would go usually and spend part of the day interviewing some of the people at the location, and then we would set up kind of a base camp, and then bring Cindy in blind, not knowing where she was going. And Shane, how many times were you with her that just on the car ride, all of a sudden she just would start, pouring forth information about this location before she even knew where we were heading?
More times than I expected. It was unreal, some of the things that she would say, just like you said, on the car ride. Just some of the things she said, I'm opening up, this is what's going on, I'm getting this. And whenever we would do more research, it would be spot on. It blew me away. And it also made me a lot more comfortable going into the baseline, because I knew that she was already picking up on things, and I knew that we were going to get further in the case because of some of the stuff she was picking up on. It blew my mind. And once everybody sees it, they'll know exactly what I'm talking about. It's crazy.
Well, and Cindy alluded to it as well. There was, the first episode we filmed together was pretty profound for me, because there were experiences that I had that in 13 years of investigating, I had never had happen to me before.
Oh yeah.
Physical, mental, and spiritual, just these moments. But during the baseline investigation, at our first Whaley house, that's what I'll say. And I know we have to be very careful on what we can give away, but during the baseline, there was at one point, there was just that antagonizing spirit that was just following us around. And Cindy turns right to the camera and she goes, this spirit does not like, he's going to start screwing with our equipment, and everything shuts down. And
I forgot about that. Yeah.
Remember that?
Within minutes. It was insane.
Well, it was, in the one case, was within seconds. And outside, we're at the base camp while you and Cindy are inside, and we're losing cameras, we're losing audio, and it's awesome to see this. And I know what's going on. Everybody's accounted for. I know what's happening, and watching this kind of just unfold it was really alarming to me. Like I said, that first episode was one that we stepped into a hornet's nest. And it was great. There was the executive from Travel Channel who was on set with us, and she was watching what was taking place during the filming of that episode. And when we had a couple of very spooky confrontational moments, she just turned to the production crew and said, that's it. I got to go. Get me out of here. Let's get me to my car. And she was gone. And that I knew we were on to something special when we had she's been around and has seen a lot of shows, and been a part of a lot of things. And when she was impacted by what we were doing and what she was seeing, I knew we had something special brewing just in that first episode. And it was, again, to go in to a place like Whaley House that Hans Holzer put on the map and had these experiences over 50 years ago, and to know that there is still more story to be told. I was mentioning with Alex in last hour, it was amazing to me because, like with Whaley House and a few of the other locations, I thought, what more is there to learn about these locations that hasn't been beaten to death by books, documentaries, and other paranormal TV shows? But thankfully, because of Cindy, we got put down roads that were totally unexpected, and we would find these hooks and something that opened up an entirely new part of the story. I remember producers pulling Shane and I aside and going, holy crap. Everything Cindy told us last night, we've been working on. You guys have been looking into this, researching, and we would show this line of information that, given what she had told us in the baseline, we were able to corroborate and find details of through historical records on site, papers that hadn't in any case been shown sometimes for 50 to 100 years. We just happen to talk to the people running the location or the homeowner and say, I'm just curious, the medium that we work with on the show, Cindy Kaza, was picking up on some different aspects. Was there ever anything like this? And I'd be very cautious with how I'd pose it so they didn't try to fit a round peg into a square hole. And then they would come back and be like, holy God, as a matter of fact, I've got an article we found in a newspaper from 1864, and then they'd bring out this article, or they'd hand us a handful of letters, handwritten letters that nobody had ever seen before. And the story would open up to you. And that was part of this journey that astounded me most, was just watching the perfect marriage of technology and mediumship and research come together in a way I haven't seen done before. And I was really excited to do this because it felt like we were history detectives, not paranormal investigators so much, but history detectives, kind of opening up new chapters of books, Mm-hmm. Was there ever?
I totally agree.
Was there ever, and I'm curious on both of your parts, going into the situation, I know it's scary, and I don't mean ghosty scary, but it's scary to go into these locations getting no information in advance, Cindy, and feeling like you have to perform, right? I mean, it's hinging on you to, are you going to pick something up? Or do you not worry about that? Do you not put any pressure on yourself because you just have faith? If there's something to be told, the spirits will let me know.
Well, I definitely, put pressure on myself, and I think I'm my own worst critic, of my mediumship, because I really want to be able to connect in, but then there's a point where you just have to let go of all of those fears and get out of your ego and just trust that, the spirit world is going to be there, because they're everywhere. There's spirits everywhere. So it's kind of a combination of, oh boy, here we go. I hope I'm connecting into the right spirit, and then you just have to trust. And so it was really a new experience for me. But like I said before, it was a really empowering experience as well, because there was that marriage of the technology, the mediumship, and also the validation at the end where everything came full circle. Pieces of evidence that I was getting that I thought were, didn't make any sense, wound up being discovered later on. So it helps me really, I think, as a medium grow and really learn to trust, and also learn to work with you guys, because I don't often, prior to the show, I didn't often do paranormal investigations with a lot of, technology. So it was really fun to learn how to use my mediumship in correlation with the technology and with you guys, because I know that was a bit of a learning curve for all of us, right?
Oh, it definitely was. Yeah. Just trying to piece these things together and figure out how we all fit in doing what we had to bring to this investigation. And, Shane, coming in, and you're such a peaceful, calm guy. And, going into these locations, kind of hearing these stories and being a part of it, when you're trying to set up the technology to create an experiment or an experience to see if we can capture or corroborate Cindy's stories and the history of these locations, was it daunting to come up with, the right mix of what we should put into this and what we should keep out?
Well, yeah, it was at times, because you're going into these locations, and you already have a foundation of what Hans Holzer did, and you're going in and you're trying to, like you said, piece the puzzle together and add to these cases. So at times it was kind of daunting to come up with the right experiments to get the job done. But one thing that really helped me tremendously, especially with working with you guys, was just to, open myself up to the experience and to the investigation itself, and just kind of trusting my gut a little bit, and I think we all did that at times, just trusting your gut. And sometimes, if you're going to move off in a different direction, it's okay to do that. It was kind of just letting it flow. And I think there was a good mix with that, with each investigation that we did. So it was daunting at times. Yes.
I appreciated the fact that production worked closely with all three of us and heard our concerns and our thoughts on these situations, because again, the three of us were caring people. We don't, this isn't just about the flash and sparkle of having a TV show. We were in there trying to get answers to these questions. And in some cases, when we would run into something that was quite heavy, I appreciated the fact that production didn't just put us off when we're like, we need to get help for these people. This isn't just a Casper the Friendly Ghost we're dealing with. There's something here. And right. I think people will be surprised in the Morris Jumel mansion in New York, in that episode, Cindy, when we were able to bring in some experts. And I don't want to give anything away on that, but that was beautifully profound for me to see the experts that we were able to get in to come deal with what we had uncovered, and then to have them corroborate, oh yeah, this makes complete sense, and here's why, and to give that moment. Was that satisfying to you to know that we were allowed to bring in different faiths, different belief systems, and tackle these stories individually, as opposed to just a kind of blanket, Catholic prayer and then we leave kind of thing?
Oh yeah, for me, absolutely, because people have many different, religious beliefs, and there are many different walks of faith, and I think sometimes it's easy to just go to, reading the Bible in Latin, and doing those prayers, but there are so many other ways in different religions where people clear spirits or clear houses, do exorcisms. And I really was so excited that the production company was open-minded and they went there, because I think it's really important to show people that there are a lot of other things out there, right, under the umbrella. So I was really excited about that episode.
I want to talk about when we come back, because we've only got about a minute and a half left in this segment, but part of this experience was in the experiments that you allowed us to use you in as well, Cindy, and automatic writing. I've seen bits and pieces of it on TV, but to actually be witness to it, Shane and I would sit there and watch the monitors sometimes while you were doing the automatic writing, and it was almost comical, but, and I don't mean that in a dismissive way, but it was almost comical as you're ripping away and you're kind of like telling the spirit, slow down, wait a minute, give me a second. You're trying to keep up with what they're pouring through you and trying to make sense of it. That, to me, that would intimidate the hell out of me, allowing a spirit to work through me and coming in at that fast and furious a pace to put through that information that you get. So I'd like to talk a little bit about that when we come back from the break and know a little bit more about that process. And, how do you open up and allow something to work through you and not have a fear of it taking over or possessing? Because that's what so many people that watch these shows, they're afraid that as investigators, we're taking home all kinds of spiritual and paranormal baggage. that to me seems like he was very effective in some of these cases by getting some of those nuggets of information we needed. But, did it put you out there? And Cindy, I was talking about your automatic writing. And for listeners that are not exactly sure what automatic writing is, maybe you can explain it a little bit more eloquently than I did.
Oh, you did a great job explaining it. But yeah, it's basically, I just allow the spirits to use my hand to channel through writing. So I'm actually seeing what's coming out at the same time everybody else is. I don't hear it first and write it. It's coming out in real time. So it is kind of a form of trance for sure. It's not, the trance like the mediums that Hans worked with, but it is a form of trance. And it is a little bit overwhelming. You're right. I mean, you were saying how it kind of looks comical, not in a bad way, but it's happening so quickly. And then I'm struggling to get it out fast enough. And that's a little bit of the struggle with automatic writing because it happens so fast. So, in the show, the episodes, what I had to do is write, and then stop and say out loud what I was getting. Because otherwise, I wouldn't be able to remember what I was getting. And then it's hard to go back and read some of the writing sometimes. But I find it really useful. And I love doing automatic writing because I can sit in any space and channel in a clear stream of consciousness, right? It's not like mental mediumship where I'm seeing a flash of an image, then I'm feeling something, then I'm hearing something. Because that's, then it's kind of almost like playing Pictionary, charades, and telephone sometimes. I mean, it still works. But the automatic writing is just right there, clear, coming out in sentences. So that's really why I like using it, and I feel like I'm just completely surrendered to the spirit world in those moments where I'm using the automatic writing.
Do you ever have concerns that there is going to be an attachment, that you're giving over part of yourself to the spirit world, that it may not relinquish that grasp?
I never walk into any investigation full of fear. I don't. I just don't live in that space. I definitely hope it doesn't happen, but I just don't operate in that space. I feel I have a really strong faith in God, and I just try to stay in that lane. And if it does happen, I hope it doesn't, but at least you guys will be there to help me, but it's like, I really don't operate from the space of fear. I just go in and trust. So I haven't had any problems thus far.
Well, I do promise, Cindy, that in the event of full possession and pea green soup spitting, head spinning action, I promise to throw Shane directly in your path as I run out of that building.
No.
That is Well, Shane, listen, Shane. As we're talking with Cindy about this, you and I are. We're not sensitives, I mean, certainly you can go into some places and just get a feel for it. But were you as alarmed as I was to be in some of these situations with Cindy where I felt like she was broadcasting such a big wave? You and I got caught up in it a few times where I felt overloaded by what was going on in and around Cindy. And I'm thinking of the Oceanborn Mary case.
Right.
And our heads were spinning. There was so much weirdness going on around us. Were you prepared for that? I mean, had you encountered that kind of experience at an investigation before?
No, we've had a lot of firsts, especially on this show. I've had a lot of firsts. The Oceanborn Mary case that you're talking about, it was so overwhelming, and it was really insane to see Cindy just standing there, and she was under control. It was like she was operating on a different wavelength, and
she had to watch out for. She had to watch out for her two idiot 5-year-old brothers hopped up on pixie sticks and Jolt Cola. Because
right, we kept saying every few seconds, what's that? Did you hear that? You hear that whispering? I don't want to go into it too much, but it was crazy. Me and you, we were bouncing back and forth, and it was overload, just like you were saying, overload. And Cindy was just standing there calm and collected the entire time. It was definitely a first for me. Definitely a first.
Yeah, I don't know how. I mean, I've always thought it'd be great to have mediumistic abilities. But there, like I said, there were times where I feel like you just cracked the door open a little bit to let us in, Cindy. And I thought afterwards, oh, hell no. I don't know how you deal with that because it was so unnerving. And, we're talking very basically, folks, because we don't even know what made it into these episodes.
True.
We film, so people understand, we spend 5 days at these locations speaking to the experiencers, historians, getting a chance to do the baseline investigation on our first night out there, and then breaking down the stories and then spending the night investigating. So, we're filming 12 to 13 hours a day for 5 days, and this gets pared down to 42 minutes. And there's going to be some loss of what we experienced into what makes it into the episodes. But, it was really fascinating to be a part of this. And I hope that if some of these instances that we're alluding to don't make it into the series, that, something similar will happen in the future, because I'd love for people to see when you take two goofballs who are not used to that, and watch them suddenly getting sunburned very rapidly by this psychic kind of wave that was taking over these locations. I felt bad for you, and going back and watching the footage when we were watching the evidence review, I felt bad for you, Cindy, because I felt like you were the teacher dealing with two hyperactive idiot 5-year-olds. We're running around. What was that? Did you effing see that? What the F was this? And we're screeching and banging into each other and just heads on constant swivel. And it happened at a few of these locations where it was just overwhelming. And, I give a lot of credit to production for the fact that they saw what was going on and they understood, gosh, there's going to be some of this really cool stuff we just can't use in the episode, because although it's interesting, it really has nothing to do with our findings. It has nothing to do with the pieces of evidence that are lining up. It's not that it's not as profound, but I don't know if they're going to want, see Laurel and Hardy bouncing into each other in the scene, when there's other aspects of the story to tell. So I'm excited and nervous to see how this final product comes out, because again, you film 5 days in a row for 12 hours a day and know that just fragments are going to make it into these episodes. And, we're in there a long time investigating, and it gets pared down to maybe like a 5-minute, 10-minute segment on an episode, which is kind of the highlight reel for you guys to see. But we had things happen that in 13 years I've never had happen investigating, period. And some of those things rattled me. Some of them were exciting. And it was great to see the response from you guys as well, because even you as a medium, Cindy, when we would hear a disembodied voice fly out in front of us, it was amazing to see that there were moments even you got rattled, because it was like, what the hell was that? And
no, that was terrible. Like, I was actually terrified in some of those moments. Yeah.
And kind of it's readjusting back down. I don't know. How do you decompress after an investigation, especially some of the intense investigations that we do? How do you just kind of psychically shake that off and not be, because there were nights I just couldn't go back to sleep after we get back to our hotel room.
Yeah.
I don't know how you deal with that on a regular basis.
Yeah, well, I usually have like Palo Santo or sage in my room, and I just sage the crap out of myself. And then I take a shower, and then I go to bed, right? Because I have to have some sort of a ritual to kind of decompress and feel a little bit cleared. But yeah, I mean, some of those situations were really, for me, I was scared. So, and I'm used to dealing with the spirit world all the time. So yeah, it says something, right?
Yeah, it certainly does. Were you overwhelmed many times by this stuff too, Shane? I mean, it's, we, in all honesty, I feel bad. We put you into a lot of situations where we put you into some of the creepiest places.
Poor Shane.
And, Cindy has a job to do. She was trying to communicate and connect. My job is to not get hurt. So I thought it'd be best if I put you in those situations, Shane. And you
well, thank you. I appreciate that.
You reluctantly went in. When you go in, were you surprised by the type of activity and amount of activity that we would find at some of these locations?
Absolutely. Going into these, even though I was reluctant, I just, with the technological side and, knowing the experiments that we can do, at the same token, I wanted to kind of open myself up and kind of put myself, okay, if there's a spirit wanting to communicate, or if there's spirits here that are staying behind for whatever reason, I kind of want to get on their level and, try to experience what they're experiencing or what they did experience. And whenever I did that, oh man, people just have to watch and see. It really made a difference, and terrifying at times, but they were experiences that I will never, ever forget.
Well, watching these programs, over the last 14 years on TV, it's really easy to be the stoic armchair quarterback and watch it and go, that guy's an idiot. How dare he run? What did you expect was going to, you're in there. And then I'll tell you what, until you're in the moment and all hell breaks loose and it's something you weren't prepared to confront or just didn't understand, I'm not trying to say we weren't prepared for these things. You go in prepared and understanding that there's activity there, but there's a difference between hearing about the activity, getting firsthand accounts from people, and then having it explode around you. There were a few times during the filming of this series, I will say I was full out terrified of the moment because I was just unprepared to that kind of deal. I mean, there's the video footage is out there right now. They've shown it in the trailer preview of me hitting the ground. That was something that has never occurred in my lifetime. And to realize that force does exist. This isn't just a machination of Hollywood, that this is something that can happen. And Cindy, I know you're much more in touch with the physicality of the spiritual nature, but was that even a surprise to you to see that something has the force to knock down a 280-pound guy?
Oh, that was very surprising. I've never seen that happen, honestly, Dave. And the way that it happened, I mean, we kept rewatching it, and there's no way you could have forced yourself to fall that way. You were pushed. It was completely insane, and it happened. So I think, I can speak for myself, like, that's an undeniable, something that happened undeniably in real time, where you were being pushed by something really negative that wanted to hurt. And that's really unsettling.
And the fact that you kind of sensed that it was there and getting irritated with us prior to that happening. When I watched the footage back and I've talked to the producers, our first I'm sorry, Shane, but our first thoughts were, oh God, thank God Dave got thrown into Shane, because if I would have been hit in your direction, I'm pretty sure we would have lost a medium this season.
I would have come to the field and you'd be investigating me.
That hit me with such force and knocked me into Shane, into the wall. Both of us ended up bruised and battered from that moment. I'm so thankful that it didn't decide to chuck me at the medium, because that would have been, I don't know, it would have been a hell of a first introduction for you and I as I topple on top of you in a dark room and break your hip and spine. But that was alarming as hell.
Yeah, everybody was saying, "Oh, poor Dave," and I was like, "Did anybody see Dave slam into me?" I was like, "That hurt." That was like a linebacker that it hurt. Okay,
Shame. Poor Dave.
But I'm okay.
Just got hit with a 300-pound idiot, and it's poor Dave. Yeah, at least I had a nice, soft, cushy guy to run into when I got pushed.
I'm not that cushy now. Not that cushy.
It's much better than hitting the wall like you did. You went full force into the wall and into the corner of that wall. So not only did you get hit from my side, but you got hit from the other. So yeah, you definitely took the brunt of that. Of that hit. And we laugh about it. It's easy to do right now, but in the moment that scared the hell out of me, and I left the house and I needed to reassess everything, because I was out there having a coming to meet Jesus meeting with myself and with the Lord. I'm like, I don't know if this job is right for me. I'm kind of old. Maybe I felt like I felt like Danny Glover in the Lethal Weapon series. I'm just too old for this, you know. And that was our introduction investigation.
Yeah.
You know, that was unnerving, but there was so many great aspects of doing the show that I'm excited to show people, because again, I felt like we were history detectives going through this story and kind of digging into different aspects, and it was really refreshing to me to hear the homeowners, the business proprietors, the experiencers tell us that they were surprised we came up with what we came up with, because they thought we would be taking the same tact everybody else did and taking the low-hanging fruit. And I don't mean that rudely, but you hear that
you're right.
Ghost ABC is here. That's what people go to contact. They forget that there might be more layers to the story. And we would push past Ghost A, B, and C looking for the alpha and omega of the spirit world. What's really here that was here before them, or what's come since them that might be the real story behind this. And it was great to hear the people we were helping respond to that, and they were thankful that we were able to give them these insights, and it brought comfort to some of them. Some of them, I don't know how the hell they're going to keep living there or working there, because in some of the cases where you've got that kind of activity taking place on the regular, to me that's crazy. It's just that's their normal. Even as a medium, Cindy, isn't there some of those places you're just like, how do you just live in this moment all the time?
Well, but as a medium, the thing is I'm able to really, for the most part, control my abilities. So I'm not walking around all day open like that. And so what I think happens sometimes is people that work in these spaces, in these environments, they don't know how to pull their aura in. They don't know how to protect themselves. So they're just walking around completely open, So I feel like if they could learn some of those techniques, it would be much easier for them to function in those environments. Although we've got a lot of physical activity of things moving and doors slamming and people getting close, so it's kind of a different scenario,
Well, and then to see the reactions, that was really impactful to me as well in talking to the experiencers, because, you're skeptic, and I know, Cindy, you're a big skeptic. You're even a skeptic of mediumship abilities, and some of the psychic stuff. You question, make sure that you know that you're getting legitimate information, you're getting good information, but you sit there and you see the look. And Shane, you and I saw this a lot in post or pre-interviews, and Cindy, you and I saw this a lot in the wrap-up interviews with these people when we were showing the evidence. You could see that they were physically and emotionally moved by what they were seeing or hearing from us. It was a relief to them. There were tears fought back on quite a few of the episodes by people that we were, talking with. And, we're not just talking people, lonely at home dealing with something that may or may not be there. I mean, we were talking to cops, guys who have had, 30 years on the force, were still profoundly affected by the things that they saw and that they witnessed. You're talking to people that have reputations, lawyers and cops and doctors and medics and, museum owners. And you realize that this isn't just a ghost story to them. It's a very impactful part of their life. And that really struck me going into this as well. I wasn't sure how these people would stand up under the scrutiny and being kind of cross-examined and interviewed by both of us and kind of looking for these answers. And I was really, I thought it was a compelling part of it to see their stories and just see the emotion level behind their stories. And I know that touched you, Cindy. There was a couple times you and I even had kind of watery eyes as we were hearing the stories that people had to share.
Mm-hmm. And, it's always nice when we're able to bring them some closure and comfort. And also people just want to know that they're not crazy. I mean, that's when you can come in and say, hey, look, nope, these things really are happening in your house or in the place that you work. Because a lot of people run around, they have these experiences and they're convincing themselves that they're losing their minds, or people are telling them that they're crazy. So even when you can just corroborate their experiences, it's such a relief.
Shane, we've only got a few minutes left together on this, but if you had to put your finger on it, which one of the episodes are you most excited about seeing and how it turned out?
To be honest, the premiere, the one that's coming up, because I believe that episode is the episode where we really came together and gelled. So I'm really excited for everybody to see the one that's coming up this Thursday. That's probably the one I'm most excited to see.
And what about you, Cindy? Which story are you looking most forward to seeing unfold?
I don't know. I mean, I'm looking forward to seeing all of them, honestly. I think Ocean-Born Mary, I'm super excited to see how that one came together, too.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I was going to say that's tied for me with the Devil in Texas story, because that was so profoundly personal in helping Lydia with the case and what she was going through. It was, and it was, it took a lot of twists, and the Ocean-Born Mary case was such a fragmented puzzle. I felt like we were looking at a puzzle that had been put together from 4 different puzzles, and it was. That to me excited me because of how much we had to sift through to get to the truth. And that's one I feel like we would make Hans the most proud of, because there was so much. He was so stoic at his time. It would have been easy for him to sell out and say, oh yeah, this place is haunted and it's, an amazing story. But he never signed off. He never gave those people their endorsement. And people were left wondering why. And although he couldn't give a defining answer, he knew there was something off. And 50 years later, we're able to go in and dust off that case file with a new, fresh set of eyes and technology and the advent of all of what we're able to dig up online and through researchers and find those answers. So that to me was one of the most interesting stories that I'd ever heard, period, in the world of the paranormal, and hearing how legend kind of supersedes history in that case.
It was.
Yeah, so that's it. That to me is one of the biggest payoffs, to see how that one pulls together. And I know it sounds weird, folks, when you hear us say we can't wait to see how it looks, but again, you don't know. You're filming 60, 72 hours worth of footage, and it gets pared down to 42 minutes. It's going to be interesting to see what all comes out in the mix. I know the evidence is profound in a lot of these places, and the stories were great. The people were amazing that we got a chance to work with. So just like working with you guys, I had a great time this season. I'm looking forward to many more seasons, and I want to thank you both for coming on tonight and doing the show with me. So thank you both.
Yeah,
likewise. Thank you so much, Dave. I appreciate it.
Well, we will, the big premiere, October 3rd, and then every Thursday on the Travel Channel. Keep your eyes out for it. Stay tuned. We'll be back. Gabe Roth next. Calling all true crime fans, the Court Junkie podcast is now once a week on Podcast One. Imagine being wrongfully convicted for a crime you didn't commit, or a killer is still on the loose even though there's enough evidence for an arrest. The Court Junkie podcast shines a light on the injustices of the judicial system through deep dives into court documents and interviews with those closest to the case. Download new episodes of Court Junkie podcast every week on Apple Podcasts and Podcast One.
Beyond the darkness.
For those of you that missed last week's show, it will air again, but keep checking listings on the Travel Channel so that you don't miss these episodes. I recorded this episode earlier in the week before the very first episode aired, and none of the team had seen the episode yet, so it was exciting to get a chance to watch it. Cindy, Kaza, and I, who were in Salem for the Haunted Salem Live program on Friday, we sat down together and watched it late night Thursday when they did the replay, and it was... I got to tell you, it was one of the most special moments, being able to sit next to Cindy, my castmate, my friend, and watch the show together. It's something that'll be with me forever. I wish Shane could have been there with us, but he was in spirit. And we just had such a great time watching the show together and reading all the social media messages. So that was fantastic. Now, as we wrap up today's today's program, I'd like to introduce you to our final piece of the show, and this is Gabe Roth. Hey, if you're looking for the perfect thing to do on a Thursday night, why not sit down with the family and start watching the Holzer Files? It's backed with the Dead Files. You can find them on Thursday nights on Travel Channel, so you can tune in, check out the new episodes. We're going to be running episodes all the way through to December, 10 episodes as we explore strange, unusual stories and get a chance to re-examine the case files of the legendary Professor Dr. Hans Holzer. He is considered by many to be one of the first American ghost hunters, and certainly one of the most famous, with over 145 books written, multiple TV appearances, news stories, and just a very big presence out in the field. This guy helped to create the Holzer method of investigating and incorporating the use of trance mediums and just dictating, filming, recording every nuance of these investigations. He kept every letter, every message, every back and forth he had with clients that were in need of help or looking for insights. And in the new show, The Holzer Files, you see, of course, the team that's out actively investigating in the field. Alexandra Holzer, who is there kind of helping to direct us and giving us the insights to what her father had shared with her about these cases, what she knew about it or what she was able to uncover. But one of the unsung heroes of this program is our guest in the third hour now. Gabriel Roth has produced and directed for Quentin Tarantino, David Lynch, AMC, Shudder, Uproxx Media, Nat Geo, A&E, Lifetime, and Paramount Television, among others. And recently he produced, wrote, and served as showrunner for AMC Shudder's first original program, The Core. Roth also directed and wrote Snapchat's hit series F That with Vince Staples, and he was a producer on Destination America's paranormal program Evil Things and Lifetime's hit paranormal series My Haunted House. However, this time, Gabe has stepped out into a new realm with us. He is our researcher behind the scenes, digging deep through the boxes and file cabinets and drawers of Hans Holzer and piecing together an elaborate puzzle that gets us started on each one of these cases. Gabe, thank you so much for being here with me today.
Dave, I'm so excited to be batting cleanup here for you.
Well, it's great to have you on, and I know you're my West Coast guy, so I appreciate you hanging in for the last part of this segment. But the first thought is going to be, I mean, you've got such an amazing background and work in this field. Why did you want to be a part of a program where we're going to keep you basically stuck in a dusty, dirty basement sifting through boxes? I mean, I guess as a producer and an editor and director working in this, that's kind of what your job is anyways, is taking pieces of a fragmented story and making it cohesive. So this is probably second nature to you, isn't it?
Well, my background actually is in journalism. I studied journalism at New York University, and I worked at CNN in London. And when the Fox News Channel was first starting up, I worked there. And then I worked in documentary, and I've always had the journalism bug. So it was of great interest to me. I was actually working on that show Evil Things for Painless Television, the production company, the Holzer Files, when Jim Casey, the guy who owns the company, was telling me that he had gotten his hands on all of Hans Holzer's research. And it's sort of, if you've read off my resume a bit, that's my wheelhouse, right? Like, I'm interested in things that are a little bit spooky. I mean, our yard's already done up for Halloween, and we're here at October 1st, or October 2nd now. So I was like willing to be a PA running cups of coffee to work on this show. So wherever they could fit me in to help out and to get this research done and to get the show put together, I was willing to help. And then when the opportunity arose to actually work hand in hand with Alexandra, it's just like you get that once in a lifetime. And so it started out with Alexandra sending me a giant box of her father's books. And what was fascinating about them is they all smelled like smoke. some part of me feels like, okay, is this my first introduction to Hans? I get to actually have a little piece of him with like his old tobacco smoke smell in all the pages of every book that I'm leafing through. And then having the chance to go through all this footage, it's such a privilege. The thing is, it's daunting. There is an unbelievable amount of 16 millimeter film and audio recordings and files to go through. And I honestly haven't gone through it all yet. So Alexandra's been a big help. The production team behind the scenes has been a big help, but we've been slowly going through it, but we have many more seasons of material to get through. So I'm hoping we get to do more of it because it was a lot of fun to look through that all.
You know, it really was. And what really struck me about this was the fact that we get to replay these moments in his life, whether it's the audio recordings. Did that, you know, I mean, as somebody who's a filmmaker and a journalist and has worked in this kind of field, to see the actual footage, to hear the actual audio recordings and see the photographs and everything, was that kind of a surreal moment for you, that this wasn't just ghost stories, but we're actually hearing, seeing, kind of getting the full sense of this guy and his work?
Well, another area of interest, I'm kind of a skeptic. So I am the one person on the team that has never seen a ghost. But as I said to Alex when I first met her, I believe that energy doesn't die, as we all, we know, but energy has to transform and go somewhere. And I'm interested in that. And I want some proof that there's ghosts, right? And so early on in my life, I remember my family used to vacation to this place, Mohonk Mountain House. And anyone who's been around New York or slightly upstate New York knows this place. And it's been around since the late 1800s. And you walk around this old mountain house at night and you feel it. You feel the vibe. And there used to be a rocking chair on the 5th floor at this far end of it that used to rock by itself. And my brothers and I used to dare each other to go up to this thing, and we'd always kind of freak out. But that was sort of my only sort of inkling of anything that I ever saw that could have possibly been a ghost. It could have been a draft. I don't know. But I've always questioned myself, but I was open to the idea that was possibly a ghost that was revisiting that rocking chair every evening, late at night. So, and I happen to now live in an old craftsman house that has like this back guest quarters. And whenever my aunt used to come stay here, she would say, there's something back there in the house with me. I don't know what it is. Hopefully it wasn't rats, but she really felt it. And I'm actually sitting in that back house right now. I thought it'd be the perfect place late at night to have this conversation with you. So I came to it as a little bit of a skeptic. And I watched all the old film and listened to the audio with that point of view. I want it proven to me that these things are real. And what I do know is that everybody involved truly believes what's happening there. The trance mediums, particularly Sybil Leek and Ethel Myers, who come up over and over in all these investigations, it's quite convincing when you're sitting there listening to them channel these spirits. And Hans is so relaxed and so calm about everything, and he has an analytical approach to everything that I found him to be completely believable. And then particularly when you talk to Alexandra, and she has a presence about her as well. So I unfortunately did not get a chance to go on any of these adventures with you guys, but hopefully if we do more seasons, I would like to be there to walk into places where Hans walked and where Sybil and Ethel had these seances. I would love to see all that. But when you watch the films and you're sitting in a dark basement, no question, the hair starts standing up on the back of your neck.
Oh, yeah.
And you get goosebumps. Yeah,
and
it's incredible.
When you hear...
Sorry, that was a bit long-winded. Sorry.
No, I love it. Sybil Leek, Ethel Myers, you're hearing these voices come out of these women. And, it's chilling sometimes when they're doing these channeling sessions. Those were moments that, just during the headquarters moments when you were kind of breaking this case open for us. and showing us the footage that you found. Those, I do have to admit, some of those got into my head and they were creepy as hell. And it's hard to sometimes separate that then when you go into a location. That's why we have to keep Cindy literally in the dark. She doesn't get to see any of the background information of what the mediums have found there or seen or experienced. But going in and hearing those voices and then going into the location again, knowing that in a lot of cases, we're the first team to be back in there in 50 years since that case first broke. Now, of course, not like places like the Constellation or the Whaley House or the Morris Jumel Mansion. There's been other investigative teams, but a good portion of these cases were, you know, individuals' homes and private residences that they've never allowed anybody else in. Although their stories have been put in Hans's books and they've had production companies reach out to them in time and perpetuity to try to get access, they have not done that until we used the name Hans Holzer. Then they were willing, because the Holzer family was behind this project, to reopen those doors for us. And, you know, that's
for Howard Dickinson too. Yeah.
Right. Well, yeah.
Yeah. The Howard Dickinson. Yeah. They were, that's an interesting one, but for sure the Holzer name got us into the Howard Dickinson house. And that'll be a coming episode, but that is, for people that are familiar with things like the Frick Museum in New York, it was once a house that becomes a museum, and the Howard Dickinson house, similar thing, up in northern Manhattan. And that one was so interesting because he had gone in looking for one thing, found something else, and it was a group of school children that saw the ghost up in the window, and it was just one of those things where nobody else was getting in to do a ghost hunt. It's bad PR for them, but the name Holzer certainly helped us out for sure.
The doors that it opens as well, and the families, you know, were you surprised that, you know, in some of these cases we're looking, you know, 30, 40, 50 years back in time, that the family still had fond memories and ideas and were willing to let us come back in and re-examine these stories. Was that ever a surprise to you?
Well, the one thing that we really had going for us was Hans never really felt like there was a lot of evil spirits. He felt like that ghosts were there because they needed help. And so I think he helped those families as well. So, you know, great case being like the first one, Rye, New York, right? I mean, like with the Lottie Peck haunting. So that's a case where the people living there were truly scared. But really, I think Hans was going in with giving these people this idea that there's nothing to be scared of. This is somebody that may not realize that they're dead and needs help passing on to the other side. And Hans had all sorts of interesting theories that when you're dead, you're not actually dead. You're just on the other side of life. And I think explaining that to these people that were, you know, once terrified, put them at ease. So it wasn't feeling like, I mean, in some cases, you know, obviously Hans felt like you shouldn't be using a planchette and a Ouija board. You're inviting in all sorts of bad spirits, right? We know that. But for the most part, I think Hans did a good job at putting the people that were currently living at the house at ease. And so for them, he was a source of relief at a stressful point in their life. And so it certainly helped foam the runway for us. No question.
Were there, you know, any of the calls that you made that were a little rough? Was there anybody that just had no interest in re-examining their case or even confronting it? Were they just kind of like, I lived it, I went through it, I want to be done with it?
I mean, there's just strange ones. I mean, like the USS Constellation, you know, like sometimes people just don't want to dig up the old history, and like Lambert Castle, you know, some people are a little bit more private, but I think with a little bit of talking to them and some emails back and forth, and once they understood our intentions, the people were more open to it. Initially, obviously, the people that are capitalizing on the idea that they're haunted, like the Whaley House, and Hans is so big in the history of the Whaley House, that was no problem. But some of the other ones where it was a little more private, the Devil in Texas, for sure, you know, it's a little bit hard for people to talk about. But I think we were always coming from a place of wanting to help people. And we have the Hans Holzer name to help us through all of that. So it ended up being okay. But there was certainly some back and forth that obviously has to be like a little bit behind the scenes. So I can't talk too much about it. But right. It happened, but we were able to, very few cases that we were looking into was anybody telling us no. There are a few, if we do coming seasons, that we're still talking to the families that I'm hoping get worked out because I would like to pursue those cases some more. And we can talk about that, off air.
Well, let's, as you're talking about putting these places together and you're going through these case files, what specifically kind of drew your attention to a story that you thought, this is something different, or this was something really standing out to you that, let's look into this?
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple. For sure, the Rye, New York one, I loved the story behind it, that the sort of into the story was Molly Guillaume, who was living there in the 1950s, right? And she was this famous portrait painter, and everyone sat from her, from Thomas Dewey to Queen Elizabeth, and she was known all over the world, right? And she and her husband, who was a naval officer who then turned into an architect, they buy this Victorian manor on Barbary Lane in Rye, New York. It's up on the bluffs. And then within weeks of them moving in, it's the footsteps and the slamming. And there was all sorts of things. Look, Molly, who is a painter, had her quirks. She had to have pay phones in her house rather than a regular landline. And there were strange things about her, right? But she was internationally known and respected. And there's actually an article on her in 1970s in the New York Times. You can Google it, where she talks about living in this house and how it was haunted. And the fact that she did this painting of Lottie Peck, who was the little, this little girl who was haunting the house, and that the Barron's family put this painting up and it sort of satisfied the ghosts. I found it was this sort of, it was this very human story with this interaction with this little girl spirit. And the whole history of the house, dating back so far to the 1860s. And Lottie Peck's dad was the master of port in New York. And there's a lot of interesting history, American history, that you can learn through these houses. And in particular, that Rye, New York house was one that I thought was so fascinating, that you get the master of port to a world famous portrait artist, and then this regular family that's living there. They were all tied together through this haunting, many generations of families. And you see that in a lot of these cases. And it just becomes endlessly fascinating that through all these generations, these people were seeing the same things. And that becomes quite convincing, even for a skeptic like myself.
And especially because sometimes, the families weren't keeping in touch with one another. We would have to dig back, and you'd realize that over the span of 100 years, 4 families owned it. 3 of those families all had experiences there. 3 of those families never once spoke to the other family that lived there to find out what their experiences were. And, you start to realize that in some of these cases, these people are almost called to these homes. That it's almost like this was their lot in life, was to become part of that house. And I know that sounds ominous.
Well, that was Lambert Castle.
Right. Well, Lambert Castle, the house in Metuchen, Rye. I mean, there's so many of these places where it just seems like they, Barnstable. We can't forget Barnstable House. That's another one where you've got this call to action, almost this spiritual awakening, where people just feel drawn to an area, drawn to a place. And then the history unfolds, years afterwards, and you find out why they might have had a connection to those locations. And
yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry.
I was going to say, like you, I'm a skeptical believer. I mean, I'm fascinated by the stories people have to share. I don't believe every story I hear, but when you start to examine some of these case files, it's to me almost impossible to think there isn't something legitimately going on here, because how do you explain this? How do you explain so many people?
Yeah, Barnstable is really fascinating. I don't know how much we are allowed to talk about it because it hasn't aired yet, or I think it's one of the later ones in the season. But just to whet people's appetites, I was interested in Barnstable in particular because I'm from Massachusetts, So I just kind of wanted to do one about it. But the Barnstable house was literally this house that get turned, I believe, into a law office. And it turns out like one of the lawyers that was working there that kept having these experiences there was connected to the families that had lived there in the past without knowing it. And it's just this incredible synergy that happens that you feel like some larger force had to be at work here. I can't wait to actually see that one all put together, because that one is kind of mind-blowing, actually.
Was there ever any sense, and I know this sounds, full of woo when I ask it, but when you're digging through these case files, you're reading the handwriting of the experiencers of Hans Holzer, you're hearing the audio, seeing the videos. I mean, did it ever feel almost like the spirit of Hans Holzer was there with you?
Yes. Like I mentioned, when I first got the books and I could smell the smoke in the pages, I was like, okay, I'm here with Hans. And then you go in that basement, and there's something that happens when you're touching something that's like real physical. You've got this physical connection to a past life. And again, it was like I mentioned this place, Mohawk Mountain House, where I first think I saw a ghost, possibly, or something. They have a barn museum where you can actually like touch all these things that were used back in the 1800s, and you can sort of feel the energy on them. And I literally just this week was at this place, Cerro Gordo Mines. It was the largest silver mine in the United States from like the 1860s, and it's thought to be haunted. And it has an energy. It has an energy when you're in there, and everything that was at this mine is still there. From like the saloon to the old brothels are still standing there. So who knows what other kinds of energy are happening around the brothels, but it's all there. And then when you're with Hans's material and you're looking through these letters, and the people are desperate when they're reaching out to him in some of these letters. They're desperate for help. You feel like you're sort of transported in time. And what can happen is, especially if you're down in this basement, time stops, having relevance. You can put your head down and then you pick your head up and like 8 hours has gone by. And you've been in this dank basement going through all this old material. But it's really invigorating when you come across something that's interesting and that you feel like could be reopened and reinvestigated. In particular, things like, the paintings at like the Peck House and stuff like that in Rye, New York.
That has to be, right, as somebody who's fascinated by the macabre and spooky, that seems like it's something ripped right out of a horror movie, right? A concept.
Mm-hmm.
You've got this ghost haunting, you've got a painting that may or may not kind of be a possession, if you will, and then the ties to multiple locations, multiple histories, all kind of unfolding at once. It sounds like, the follow-up to The Others with Nicole Kidman, right? To have those kind of...
I was just thinking that.
Was it ever...
It definitely feels like that.
Did that ever, going through it, did you ever look at a case like that and think, nah, this one just sounds too fantastic to be possible? Or did you, was that like, we've got to examine all of these cases, whether it sounds like something I would believe in or not. I want to dig a little deeper.
Well, luckily for us, Hans, just threw out a lot of cases pretty quickly on his own. He seemed to have been pretty skeptical. I think I was watching, there was that In Search Of, remember the old Leonard Nimoy show, In Search Of?
Yeah.
I had seen a while back when I first started working on this, I saw an episode with Hans, and he visits 2 different houses in Maine. And immediately, within the first couple of minutes of the show, he's asked to go to a house, and he says, that's not how he just takes one walk through it, and he knows it. So he was open to trusting his gut. And if he felt like something there was no ghost there, he wasn't going to bother with it. He had too much other stuff to go on. This is a guy that wrote, I think, 147 books or something like that.
Right.
And he, it would take me forever to actually go through all of his material. But he didn't have too many things that he wrote about that felt phony. So all of the tapes that I watched of the seances, as I said, for certain, everyone on those tapes and in those 16 millimeter films, they believe what's happening there.
Right. Gabe Roth, our guest, as we wrap up this evening's program. Gabe is a researcher, one of the investigators in this, behind the scenes, helping us to uncover the stories behind the stories. And, you know, I'm curious, are people pretty forthcoming? And obviously, being journalistic, you've got, you know, an innate ability to kind of get people to open up to you anyway. But, you know, were people pretty interested in allowing their stories to be told and kind of having a new generation hear about their paranormal encounters?
Well, it's interesting, you know, like there was, I would say Lambert Castle was an interesting one. There seems to have always been this resistance with Lambert Castle. Hans was never able to even get there. It's one of these cases where Hans kept trying to go, and there was always like a road closed or there was some storm, and he was never had a chance. Multiple times he tried to investigate this one particular house. It was built in like the 1890s by a woman named Catalina Lambert, and she was like a silk manufacturer. Her husband was a silk manufacturer, and
actually, Catalina,
it was one of those things.
Was the husband? Yeah, I know that name throws me as well, but yeah, right. Catalina Lambert was the husband, and yeah, right. It worked in the silk textiles.
Yeah, but it was one of these things where. You know, someone was having these dreams about it, and they kept being called to it and drawn to it. And talking to someone like that, they're reaching out, but then they become resistant to doing it. And people tend to get cold feet when they know that they're going to be on camera about it. That's where the resistance comes in. Initially, people want to talk about it, and they'd love to have somebody help them. But then once they hear that their story might be told, like in that case, they just get a little bit of cold feet about being shown to the public. They don't want to be thought of as crazy, you know? But you sort of have to reassure them that, well, for me in particular, it's not such a hard conversation because I'm a bit skeptical. And so we just want to make sure that everyone feels comfortable to know that nobody thinks they're crazy. We're going to look into it. And if there's something there, we're going to let them know. You know, Cindy is quite good at her job, and she's and as is Shane with the tech, which actually kind of leads me to a question, if I may ask you something, Dave.
Turning the journalistic tables on me.
You will. I just one thing we've never had a chance to truly discuss was how it squares with our methods. For researching versus what Hans's methods were, because I feel like we use the Holzer technique, but there is also a reliance on some technology that I'm not sure he would have used, right? And then Cindy's not a trance medium; she's a medium, correct?
That's right. She has the ability to do trance mediumship. She had explained to me that she just elects not to do that. She doesn't like giving over that kind of control to the spirit. She does things like the automatic writing, which is in a form trance mediumship, but it's more controlled environment for her.
And so how did Alexandra feel that her father would feel about our use of technology in the investigations?
Well, that's what I asked her before we even took the show. And I talked to her about this in the first hour. Was, you know,
okay,
her father
I want to
was
repeat
not
the same thing.
No, that's fine for people that are just tuning in and have that same thought. You know, he was not a big proponent of technology, but that's because there was no real technology to ghost hunt with. You know, there was very rudimentary, basic things, and he thought it was just as important to just have the medium, have a camera, video camera, and an audio recorder working, and that. You know, he was very basics, and it got the job done, and he was successful at it because people would contact him and tell him, "Oh, we got you. Whatever you did worked, and you know, we're not having that problem anymore." So he was very efficient with that. But you know, Alexandra mentioned in the first hour that she's had afterlife conversation with her father through some of this technology. So obviously he's altered his perception on it. And she thinks that, he would have been skeptical and questioning some of the equipment, but would have been willing to entertain some of it as well.
Yeah, she told me that he constantly communicates with her, is what she has told me, through various ways. I hadn't heard about through the technology, though. I'd heard about, she told me, through some tables moving and some books sliding around, particularly his own books, if she wants to point her towards something in particular. She told me on set, which I thought was pretty fantastic. So it's interesting. So how much are you relying on the Holzer method as the way he did it versus the technology? Or do you feel like you had a good marriage between the two?
That's what we've tried to do, is marry the technology, the mediumship, and history into a new kind of cohesive program so that we're able to dig a little deeper. I mean, Hans was very good at getting to the root of the history as much as he could, but we've been able to uncover even deeper now. You can now, you pay $10 a month, you can be on newspapers.com and get access to articles dating back, digitized articles dating back into the sometimes 16 to 1700s, and you're able to read these things. And all of a sudden it opens up a whole other part of the history that Hans knew there was something more to the story, but he just couldn't put his finger on it. And it wasn't available to him at that point. But now it's been digitized and made available, and we're able to go that extra step. And not that he wasn't good at what he was doing, but he was also limited by what was available at those times.
Yeah,
so
it's a great point.
And that was what helped draw me into doing it, was the fact that I felt like, all right, by being a part of this program, having the Holzer family behind it, going in knowing that we can, kind of rest assured that this is what's going on. It was very kind. Alexandra thanked us in the first hour tonight, saying, she appreciates the work we were able to do in her father's name and continue this journey for him. And it'll never be closed. That as we dig into these files, there'll always be questions, and 20, 30, 40, 50 years down the road, if they re-examine these cases, there may be even more information or newer technology that will take this case even further.
Yeah, I guess Hans always said a paranormal case was never really closed, right? So they can always keep going forever.
Well, and if, ghosts truly are history's way of reminding us where we've been, it should always be a part of this. And, let me ask you that. I'm curious what your thoughts are, kind of in the journalistic vein. With the popularity of the paranormal and horror movies at an all-time high, what do you attribute to that? This kind of reawakening of spirituality in the 21st century.
Yeah, I think it goes along maybe with a little bit of some people questioning religion a little bit, as Hans clearly did. I think that with technology, we're able to see more than we ever could before, right? And you can easily record something and get it out to the public right away. And then we're also better at debunking fakes these days. So, obviously, one of the big things is Harry Price, right? He was the original ghost hunter back in England. And his whole thing was he made his name off of researching Borley Rectory in Essex, England. And a lot of that stuff, now that we can look at it with a critical eye, you can pick out as fake. But what that does is when you finally get some real evidence that you can't dismiss easily as fake, as, long exposure photography or, double exposure photography, things like that, then it becomes really interesting. So the other thing about it, Dave, honestly, is it's just plain fun, right? We all have a sense of something in the room with us, right? And we all have a sense of something, a shadow lurking in the dark, right? We've had those moments. Everybody can relate to those moments. And with this current technology, you can sort of dig into that and see, was there actually something there with the temperature readings and with all the different meters that Shane can set up and detect things. That wasn't available before. It was easier to dupe people. It was also, I think, for most people that were critical thinkers, it was easy to write off. But it's not as easy to write off these days with the current technology, I think. I don't know. What do you think about that?
Well, I agree. I mean, it could be, the fight is always, but, what is this technology really? It's still experimental. It's, people complained on a lot of the paranormal TV shows saying, oh, they're out there waving around these pieces of equipment that weren't meant for ghost hunting. Well, you're right. They weren't, but we found a secondary use for them. K2 meters, stud finders, wire finders, things like that. Though they were meant to find, and these were tools that we brought to investigations to try to find physical realities that may be causing a false narrative. So people think they're having a paranormal experience. It might be high levels of EMF. It may be, radio frequencies interfering with, different things in their house. So we would go in and use these tools to try in a scientific way to discount the paranormal encounters. What we started to find was that in some instances, something seemed to be playing with the technology and would communicate. You'd take we can't really find an answer here of why you're feeling this way or what you're hearing in this house. And all of a sudden the machine would start beeping or buzzing, and then it would stop, and you'd ask a question and it would beep and buzz, and you could have this back and forth communication. So it's kind of interesting to say, hey, this technology was not built for this, but then you've got, people like Gary Galka and Bill Chappell and so many others that are out there taking the theories of what's taking place in the paranormal field and creating. And they've got real engineering backgrounds and machining backgrounds, and they're creating technology to put to the test the theories that paranormal investigators have. And they've created some very proficient equipment that gets undeniably strange activity. But it's funny, even in those cases, you've got the creators behind them not willing to say it's a ghost. They say, I don't know what it's experiencing. It's weird. It's strange phenomena, but I can't go on record because there's no way to corroborate it and say, yeah, this is definitely a ghost. But they're just as baffled by the equipment that they've got. Bill Chappell tells a funny story, and I love repeating it. It's just when he was creating one of the talking devices at first, it was that phonetic mode, and it would talk like the robot voice, and it would say certain things. But he had every word has a mathematical principle to it, right? So it has to be triggered to speak. And then he's got certain interrupts in there so that it can't repeat a word over and over and over. If it is, then that's something tripping and beating the defense that he has built into the machine, which is then something fascinating. And he's got this really interesting piece of equipment. Now, he goes by Bill Chappell, but his real name is Billy Chappell. But he's not fond of that. He likes being called Bill. So he's working in his workshop, and you keep hearing the talking machine taunting him. It keeps going, Billy, 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 Billy. And Bill goes, I like to be called Bill. And then you hear the voice just stop, and then it goes, Bill, Billy, 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 Billy. And we all burst into laughter because it's just so funny that it's mocking him. And he's like, Dave, I have no clue what the hell's going on, why these things are happening. Yeah, I mean, it seems like something else is influencing it, but he's not 100% sure that it's not us in some way.
Well, it sounds to me like you told me a story. I don't know if you've told this or if you want to tell this on camera, that something happened to you in particular off camera where it seemed like one of the spirits was a bit of a prankster at the Whaley House.
Yeah, I've been very cautious on how I present that because I don't know how I don't know if it made the episode. I don't know what they're going to do with it. But
okay,
I was definitely physically violated twice while at the Whaley House, and knocked on my ass once, and had a very. I'm glad you find this humorous, Gabe. You weren't thrown around like a rag doll, but it's
nope.
But I had another experience where something, kind of, I was getting cocky and trying to think of a way to, for lack of a better term, intimidate the spirit. How can I challenge the spirits? And it, in no uncertain terms, let me know I was not in charge there. And it was a very violating, it was embarrassing and weird feeling, but it let me know I wasn't alone, and that it wasn't going to take my BS. And so it was really an awkward situation and moment for everybody involved. As I turned to the camera guys and the director, and I'm like, hey, I don't know what I should do here, but this just happened to me. And they're all like, get out of here. And again, I don't know how much I can give away, so I'm being very cautious with it as we have certain things in play. We want people to tune in and check out the show, but I'd like to give them a little teaser. You've seen one of the pieces of video footage already out there, folks, where if you've been watching on social media and they put it up, I get knocked pretty hard into Shane into the wall. So poor Shane takes the brunt of it, because not only does he get hit by me, but he gets hit into the wall. But something was definitely very powerful in letting us know that it was there. And in kind of going back to your comment about questioning religion, I noticed that if you really think about it, this kind of new wave of spirituality really exploded within a few years of the attacks on 9/11. And I've mentioned this before. When I was at Warner Brothers Studios recently, they were talking about the times that horror movies did best were during times of war and depression.
Yes.
And it really exploded. And I think, spirituality seems to follow that same vein. There would be the Civil War, the American Revolutionary War, the Vietnam War, the Korean War, so many wars, and people want to make that connection and try to reconnect with the other side. 9/11, we were attacked on our own soil. There were a lot of questions. People went back to church in droves seeking answers and weren't necessarily satisfied with conventional religious answers of God works in mysterious ways. And I think that turned a lot of people more towards spirituality to see if they could get direct answers.
Yeah, I agree.
And then you look at the type of entertainment. Horror movies have blown up, and different types of horror movies have blown up since 2001. That, it's kind of a reflection of what we're seeing in daily culture. Things are a little bit more violent. Things are a little bit more real and scary. The enemy is kind of within us, right? And you're seeing more of that concept, which is always what made George Romero's zombies so popular. His movies were kind of a cultural statement about where we were. Look, Dawn of the Dead, everybody the zombies are going back to the mall because that's what they knew in life. That's what they were comfortable with. And that's where they would go back to. So it was kind of this comedic take on that sense, but it was also very telling of where we are as a society. And you can kind of tell by the horror movies and the type of entertainment people seek by what's going on. And, we're populated with death in our news every day, and shootings and stabbings and war and things that are taking place around the world. And, it's kind of like you would think that people would turn away from the horrific, but they almost seem to embrace it more, like they're seeking answers or looking for that point the finger to.
Yeah, I think that it's funny. The paranormal, has always had this special place in horror, and then particularly with Blumhouse, reinvigorating it with Paranormal Activity, which was done so brilliantly. But it's just one of those things that has always, had people's attention, whether it was, the Haunting Hill, like the Hill House movies and the House on Haunted Hill and things like that, all the way through Haunting Hill House now. It's just one of those things that we're always going to like, both for the entertainment value, but also there's just something about having a connection to the past, this like physical connection to the past. And as you have experienced, people need some kind of closure with that also. You personally helped people while we were shooting this show. And so I think everybody hopes for that and wants that, and it sort of satisfies this sort of deep desire that we have as humans for some answers to things that maybe went unanswered. And you see that on these paranormal investigations, which is also part of what makes me a little bit skeptical sometimes. I feel like sometimes people want something to be there that might not be there because it's something that they're lacking in their life or they're looking for an answer, I don't know. How has that been for you when you sort of can bring closure to someone through these investigations?
That's my favorite part, is giving them an answer, whether it's taking them, off the ledge of fear and kind of re-empowering them. And we had a very powerful story this year in the Devil in Texas episode with Lydia.
Yes.
Very powerful episode where, we saw one of Hans's files that ended on a very dark turn.
Yes.
And there was a contemporary case taking place that seemed to be following that same vein. And, going in and trying to help somebody and give them, or try to give them back their power is important. So that's what, I've been doing that for years since I started the show, and people, reach out asking for help. And, sometimes it's funny, they've been terrified for years. And in one phone call, you can take them back from the ledge and give them the real, reality of, hey, you don't have to be afraid of every shadow. Not everything is the devil coming to suck your soul out, and once they can embrace that fact and feel like they have control over it. It's been funny because I'll tell them my door's always open. My phone's always on. If you need me, call. And, I hear from them a few years later. They're like, after your conversation, I never had another experience, or I just told them to knock it the hell off and leave me alone. And then it stopped. And, that does my heart good, knowing that that's the case. But then you've got the cases where it doesn't, and they still need further look. And it's one of those kind of stories where if I can't bring in the right help, I find somebody that can. And we did that on this series. There were a couple of episodes that, was outside of the wheelhouse for Cindy, Shane, and myself on how to deal with what we were going into. So we got somebody that was good at it and knew what they were doing and could attack the situation from the ground that it needed to be. It's kind of like you can't, oh gosh, how do I say it without giving too much away? You can't attack everything same Christian principles when there are different rules that apply to the type of activity that's taking place. And we were able to do that in a few of these episodes and bring different perspectives and different ideals behind how to deal with these hauntings. And it was very rewarding, the whole situation. That's why I hope people will tune in, check it out, and will enjoy it as much as we did creating it, because it was truly one of the best experiences of my life, was doing this first 10 episodes.
Well, it's so interesting what you're saying about telling people that they might not be afraid. Like Hans said, there are no such thing as demons. A demon is a Greek word for ghost, right? Like that's one of the things I kept seeing in his writing. And he talked a lot about how like alcoholics were more prone to be taken over by a spirit. So it wasn't like quite a demon possession that he believed in, but he did believe that if you let yourself stay open, you could be taken, that a spirit could take on your body. And that's why he was saying the things about like, don't use Ouija boards. If you're alcoholic, you might be open to it. I don't know. What were your thoughts on any of that? I mean, I'd love to do an episode where we do a Ouija board and see what happens.
And we're open to that if we go to a season 2. We're out of time tonight though, Gabe, but let's talk about this. Maybe when the season's over, we'll bring you back on. Thank you for being here.
I want to talk about reincarnation. So many things we got to cover.
Do it.
Okay.
We'll do it. Thank you for tuning in today. I hope you guys enjoyed today's program and a deeper insight into the Holzer Files, getting a chance to meet each one of the cast members and people integral behind and in front of the camera. It has been a pleasure presenting this to you. And again, from the bottom of my heart, thank you so much for all the listeners that watched the show, tweeted about it, Facebooked about it, Instagrammed about it, got the word out. Please continue to do so. And remember to watch the show. Again, if you DVR the show, watch it within 48 hours so that it actually counts towards the ratings, and hopefully there'll be more episodes and future seasons that we can talk about on the show. But keep watching every Thursday on the Travel Channel for the best in paranormal TV programming, The Holzer Files. You've been listening to the best in paranormal radio programming. This is Beyond the Darkness.